my way home from work. And I was listening to Glenn Beck. You know, people know him as a right-winger, but he's actually right-wing about some things, and probably independent about a bunch of things, and probably left about some things. I don't know. I'm not saying he's anybody. I'm not like supporting anybody. I don't believe in anybody, but you know, in terms of these political people and oh shit, and this is my exit. Damn, just came up faster than I thought it was. How far I have to go to turn around now. Oh well. I should have gotten in the right lane, far right lane, when I turned this on. Because, you know, time flies when you're talking. So, in case Kathy tunes into this, it wasn't my exit on to come home. It was the exit from 75 to 74. So I'm still about 40 minutes away. Fortunately, the exit to turn around is just a mile ahead, so it wasn't too bad of a mistake. Any case, hello MW Online, I see you there, and let's see, who's that? Oh yeah, just 2 messages there. Message retracted. Yeah, I know there's some folks that have left me messages on Facebook. I'd really like to be able to send a message there right now saying that I'm doing these streams. I got to figure out how to do that. I know it's not hard to do. Just got to think ahead a minute or two before I start these streams. But I thank anybody for any birthday greetings. For whatever it's worth, in the classroom we didn't celebrate birthdays. Because we would have been always having to celebrate somebody's birthday. But in the setting that we're in now, it's fun to celebrate. So, should the Netflix stream series have been in the cartoon style? Maybe in a sense I'm glad that it wasn't. I mean, that's what I thought was going to happen, because I didn't think they would have any footage, but they just filled it with talking heads, right? And there was only one section, one part of it was about Heaven's Gate. So, and they had, I didn't watch all the parts. I watched the first one, the Manson part of the story. And well, there's a bunch of things here. Okay, it's Kathy Southwestern. Your blinker is on. I know, I was turning. I swear. It wasn't just on for the heck of it. I'm turning around. Maybe you didn't tune in when I exposed that I was on 75 and I was supposed to get off at exit 4 and I missed the exit. I was at exit 2 at the time when I logged in to the live stream. And so I thought I had more time than I did, but I should have got in the far right lane after Hopple Street or whatever that is, because then exit 4 comes up the next exit, half mile, and I'm not gonna miss it. But anyway, I wanted to talk about some political stuff without saying too many keywords that the crawlers could identify. Not that I'm going to say anything that's bad, unless you're somebody that doesn't like to hear people talk about, well, reports that I believe have truth to them. And this has to do with the last indictment of Trump. And I'm not a Trumper, I'm not a Bidener, I'm not a left, I'm not woke, I'm asleep. Their wokeness, I'm asleep. Because they live in an illusion of wokeness. They use that terminology, to act like that they've got a higher agenda than everybody else. And yet, they're other agendas, except this time, since the Democratic Party is in power, more or less it has been for a while because of dominating the Senate and the House. And I mean, I know they don't dominate the House now and the presidency, but they did for a number of years. And so because of that, they had their way with Trump, with the 2 impeachments and that were all on shallow grounds. I thought that at the time, that it was all like shallow grounds, like they were trying to prosecute him for things that presidents do all the time. Hobnobbing with the heads of the governments. And then we found out that one of the things that Glenn Beck just said is that, which I think is true, that's, if you want to call them that, the space alien group that's behind them, and it might be more than one, because it's not just cut and dry like that, are accusing Trump of things that they themselves or their party members or the higher ups and the corporate moguls are guilty of themselves. and I rewatched the censorship hearings for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and he stood out as having some next level mind, in my opinion. I'm not saying he's perfect or he's, like awake or anything in terms of T&Do's awakeness, but it's not about that. T&Do supported Ross Perot on 2 occasions. Once when T was in a vehicle and once when after she left the vehicle. Not because they believed in everything he was saying, but because they believed that he was more objective and he could actually maybe help the country being a successful businessman. And no matter what we say about Trump and even how he got his fortune, whatever fortune he has, from his dad initially, I mean, I think he showed some success in dealing with it. I'm not saying that he was a good person. It's not about that. You don't have the choice of who is in that office. Even the vote doesn't really give me that choice because the votes are manipulated a lot of times. I mean, I'm not saying every vote is manipulated. I'm saying that, especially in this last election, there was a lot of crap going on. Okay. Anyway, so on. I know some people can't stand if I talk about any of this, as if I mean, I've listened to radio shows to where if you said the name Trump, and I've done this also while Trump was in power. Whenever he would do something that I thought was decent and I would express it, I have all these people coming at me with venom. I mean, as if he was the darkest evil that has ever existed in this country. That's not true. They've all done evil things. I mean, these wars are evil, but Trump didn't actually start any wars. I was aware of. I know he did that one action against that Iranian leader that was in Iraq at the time, where he had him killed because of whatever the reasons were. Yeah, that's that's evil stuff. That's normal though, you know how many drone attacks there are still, and like in the United States is like fostering drone attacks against the Russians now, and the Russian it's a proxy war, just like Afghanistan was with the Russians, a proxy war, just like Syria is a proxy war with the Russians. Just like, and I listen to some of these right-wingers, and I can't stand them. But since they're not the ones in power, and so they're the ones that are the underdogs, and since I know a lot about what they're talking about sometimes, and the events that happened on January, that January date, I remember the date, but I just don't want to use it in case that's a search criteria. That what happened at the Capitol. Since I was watching that like a hawk at the time that it was happening, I saw all kinds of stuff right from the beginning that was like handwriting on the wall that this was a setup. I knew it was a setup. I knew it. It was common sense to me. And I think I have some decent common sense from the small amount of T&Do's mind that I was given and I took and I still want to have. So mean, when there were those guards that were just standing there while all those protesters were like right in their face and nobody was getting hurt, they didn't have weapons out, nothing. And there was a bunch of them that were lining the staircase, going downstairs from the doors that led to the House chamber, or it was the Senate chamber, I don't know which one it was, where Ashley Babbitt was then shown as, when those guards were gone, those four guards were gone, and then the next scene that we saw in videos was Ashley Babbitt crawling through a window, and then you saw a gun sticking out, shooting her. Okay, and I don't doubt that happened, because I think they needed to make it look like it was a realistic insurrection where somebody gets killed. Then the stories they made up about things, and how there were agents in the crowd. And anyway, I can go on and on with, with all the things that were being shown on the news at the time, and how quickly they were calling this an insurrection, and how there was, it just so happens that there were not enough police there when they knew well that it was going to happen. They had the intelligence that it was going to happen. And they didn't call out the National Guard, which they did call out for some other demonstrations of, maybe it was Black Lives Matter. They had the National Guard there for that. I'm not sure if it was Black Lives Matter or another women's group of some sort that were holding protest rallies there. Because, Trump was always being protested against. And maybe he is a racist. Maybe he is a bigot. Maybe he is, to what degree, I guess all those things, can be true to some degree, because a lot of people are racist. And whenever you, according to Tiendo, whenever you want to make an issue of your race, the issue. If you make your race the issue, if you make your sexuality the issue, then you're racist. Then you're sexist or genderist. You're demonstrating that behavior by focusing on it. When if you didn't want to be identified by that behavior and that physical identity or choice identity, then you wouldn't want to call attention to it. Now, at the same time, there's a whole bunch of karma associated with race. And so, but that doesn't make it right in terms of what the next level would think about it. Although it does end up bringing in balance to so that the people that are racist and that were, dominating other people of other races are now getting their due more. That's part of what happens. Like when you fight a war, and the people that go to war, they get persecuted later, in one way or another, even by the spirit world of the people they killed that probably hang around them and try to haunt them. They used to talk about that as hauntings, right? And I don't doubt that that's the case, because it even talks about it, I think, in the record books. When you do evil, you get evil back. You don't get away with it. Nobody gets away with anything. Everybody has to reap their own karma. So anyway, this guest of Glenn's Beck which you won't hear this conversation anywhere else that I can, or maybe you'd hear it on Hannity, potentially, and I know it was on Fox. So, you know, I mean, when Bush was in power, I was pretty much hating on Fox and Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and, you know, and the way that they built up the Iraq War and bribed everybody in Congress, even Hillary Clinton. You know, I mean, bribery not meaning paying off with money, but, you know, getting them to just look the other way and allow the Republicans to foster the war that they wanted to happen also. Because that's what they do. They benefit from the wars. And I'm not going to go into all that right now, but I've talked about it pretty much in every live stream that, you know, they want all that because they want the technology development. They want to have the money for the technology development so they can fight wars against the rogue nations that aren't going along with them and other things, you know, dominate people from space and fight against what they're told are the evil aliens, the evil space aliens, you know, which actually is the Weeds talking about hating the farmer when the farmer is coming in to plow the fields. And so all those weeds, they don't want to die. They don't want to think, they think the farmer is evil. Right? So that's what's happening now. And the space aliens are leading humans to believe that. It's programming. We're programmed to, you know, if we're not programmed, if we haven't accepted the program that there is nothing beyond this planet, or that there are no people that live beyond this planet that could ever get here, or that if there are aliens here, that they're better than humans in all ways, you know, that's all programming also. And that a lot of humans think that way, all these things. And that the religions were created by the space aliens, which there's some truth to. A lot of truth to, actually. Because the next level doesn't create the religion, but the next level stimulates the truth being told, and then the aliens turn it into a religion that distorts and dilutes the truth. Okay, so anyway, back to this show that I was listening to tonight from Glenn Beck. He was interviewing some guy that I guess had interviewed with Tucker Carlson, but he didn't, you know, I shouldn't really be in. Yeah, see, nothing changes when you shift into drive from L7 on this car. And I noticed when you shift down from drive, it just goes to the next gear down from it. It doesn't go way down into the lowest gear, because that would basically strip if you're going 70 miles an hour, it would strip the gears. I'm on exit 169, just about. Anyway, so this interview was with a lieutenant in the Capitol Police Force during the event that happened on that January date. And he said that there were certain things he didn't tell Tucker Carlson in the interview he did, because he didn't want to be seen by Tucker as a conspiracy theorist. It sounded like he was in a black vehicle. I don't know if that matters to anybody, but just, you know, for the record. I mean, you know, actually, I think a lot of individuals in you know, black vehicles have a lot of because of their genetics background with the slaves and everything, the way they were treated, their ancestors, I think they have a capacity that exceeds other people. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. In some ways, okay? I'm not saying in all ways, but in some ways, I feel like I can trust them more. Sometimes, I know that goes both ways, but maybe that's a racist thing for me to say, since I'm basing something on race, So I apologize if that's the case, but I don't know. That's just the way I feel sometimes. And even though I was raised, my vehicle was raised in a racist environment, to look down on people of color. Or people of a different nations even. But I quickly blocked that out of my consciousness, though I'm aware that my vehicle can still throw those genes into my head at times. And when I see that happening, I can recognize it. So it's like a mosquito that I just flick away, because I'm not going to let that be the basis of how I think about somebody, like in a negative way. In a positive way, sometimes I end up going to the other extreme, and I think in terms of wanting to treat somebody of color better, to try to, I guess, show them that I'm not the same as other white people. Not that all white people are, racist or anything, but maybe we all are to some degree. I don't know. It's possible. But because of our own genes, which gives us something to overcome. Because the next level has no race. They have people of all colors in their vehicles, Doe said. Anyway. Doesn't sound good? What doesn't sound good? The volume? I don't know what's wrong with it. Maybe I'm not supposed to talk about this subject. Anyway, I'm going to keep on talking because I'm almost going to be home. So I just want to get to this one part of this subject. I'm only at 164 now. So anyway, he was telling this person that was being interviewed, was telling him was saying that a number of policemen in the Capitol Police Force resigned and were fired. But the chief of police was, I think, fired and then promoted and given another job by Nancy Pelosi. I think her name was Yolanda. Might have some of that a little bit wrong, but which was telling, because they blamed it on a failure of the intelligence. So this guy who was working with all those people and knew that there was something going wrong, he had an analogy of, because Nancy Pelosi was actually in charge of the Capitol Police. That's the job of the Speaker of the House. And So the comparison that he made was that you have a store, and in that store, you sell a whole bunch of different foods and things, let's put it that way, okay? And because you're in an area where there's a lot of crime, and maybe some gangs and things that might come into your store and steal things, you have somebody on in your employ that is the head of security, the head of the criminal division or whatever it is, to have a strategy, and that there was a lot of intelligence that there was going to be a big event and even an attack on the Capitol that day. And when the head of security went to the manager of the store and told the person that, they said it's not of any concern, something like that. And then I remember hearing this story, actually, I mean the real story, that did happen, to where the head of the Capitol Police went to the advisors of Nancy Pelosi and others, because every congressperson or every senator have their own security details. And none of them, they don't want any of them to be in danger. And if there's a big Capitol, if there's a big riot stirring right on the grounds there, with people that they're generally afraid of, because of the appearance of all the appearance of malfeasance with the election, which I could go through probably a dozen concrete examples that I don't know if they're all accurate. But when you have all that happening, then if I'm on a security force, I'm going to make sure that they're not going to get into the Capitol. Otherwise, my head would be on the line. If something happened to the representative, that I don't want anything to happen to them, because that's my job. So all those people, for some reason, looked away. Now, Trump was also blamed for not insisting on being more people there, more security forces. You know, maybe he, in his mind, I don't know what he was thinking, you know. I mean, I can guess, maybe, but maybe he just wasn't afraid that anything was going to happen. Because I don't think he thought for a moment that anything was going to change by people breaking into the Capitol. That can only look bad for him. I can't imagine that he wanted that to happen, especially when, you know, Pence hadn't actually authorized electoral college votes yet. this guy had a lot to say. I think it's worth looking for that Glenn Beck interview to hear what he has to say. If you're someone that wants to be objective about the story. If you don't care about it, you already have your mind made up, then, of course, don't pay any attention to what I'm saying either. And I don't care. But I feel like the next level stands for the truth. And so it looks very much like this was an inside job. I felt that right from the beginning. Just like I felt like that big event that happened in 2001 was an inside job. To some degree. I'm not saying entirely, because there could have been other countries involved as well. But doesn't mean that, but it would be probably on a need-to-know basis that very few would actually know how inside it was, because that's the way you keep control. But also the way they're keeping control is by promoting people that cooperate, even if they take the fall in some way, then promoting them to another position, which, especially if it's people that believe in your cause. And, there's a lot of people that believe that, Trump is the ultimate evil, when I don't see any lack of evil with any of them. But at least on the vaccine front, Trump was willing to believe that there were multiple ways of treating the vaccine. Treating disease. And then he was, and then they made that into a big thing, like that he was telling people to drink bleach or something like that, which was ridiculous. I saw what he said. I read the transcript later of what he said. And he didn't say anything about that. But he was clearly at odds with people, with Fauci and Burke, and not so much with Burke, I guess, but with Fauci he was at times, and it wasn't long after that event that I'm talking about, where he suggested using alternate therapies, that many doctors were standing for and were being threatened because of their standing for that. Remdesivir and other things that were known to work in other countries. He lost. He was no longer doing those conferences anymore. Those. Okay, well, I'm home. Just so you know, it is this little funny face right here that's been talking to you with my voice that has some kind of a identity to it. And I don't know, maybe I didn't say anything worthwhile, but I think, all these indictments I mean, I think it's going to backfire. But then again, the media is not going to probably talk about it. The media is mostly owned by the corporations that are in bed with the left, for the most part. So even if it does backfire, they're going to say, well, that was made up, or that's not true, or that's just, they're manufacturing lies, and nobody's going to own up to it. I don't know. But who knows what's going to happen with this next election? I don't know. Every year, every 4 years, it seems to be a worse and worse condition. So, wow. It means a lot of stuff going on. So, KWAP, if you go to the description and scroll to the bottom, the email is there. Go to description and go to the bottom. The email is there. Okay, I don't know what you mean by that. I'm trying to scroll through the I just touched the screen. Kathy told me that the other day. I can just touch the screen, and so let me look at a little bit of this. See. Gosh, you told me 3 times that my blinker was on. Jeez. I was making a turn. Just leaving town. Right, I've heard that MW1 online, that all these issues with Trump, but he can still run for president. And they're also saying that that because of the one filed in Georgia being a state issue, that he can't pardon himself for that one. And but that's not true, according to Levine, which I don't know if Levine, I mean, some things about Levine I think are accurate, because he was a lawyer, and he does talk with a lot of people. And not that I'm in favor of Levine, I mean, he's got some attitudes and stuff that I can't stand. But on that score, I think he might be right, and that he could even go to jail and still run for president and actually be president in jail. If I understand correctly. I don't know. Right, that's what Kathy said. I thought Nancy Pelosi wouldn't let them come to guard the Capitol. That's right. That was told early on. Whenever an event happens, if you pay attention to what's happening right away, I think you stand to see the most truth. But then again, it's also potential to hear more truth after the fact, especially when a case is brought up. And so, they're opening the door. That's why they want this all behind closed doors. The whole trial and everything for Trump, because who knows what witnesses he's going to bring to this. That this could be the greatest reality series that ever would be. They might get the most people watching this. Who knows? I'd watch it. Yes, I agree with you, MW1 Online. Yes, the FBI was involved in the incident at the White House. Yeah, it seems like FBI and other security agencies and the Capitol Police, and I'm sure members of government, but maybe they don't, they were probably shielded from knowing anything because then they couldn't be liable for anything, liable in a certain way. Josh Boy says, she wouldn't have that power. He refused National Guards from multiple surrounding states. He wanted it all to fall. Pelosi and the majority of the politicians at the Capitol begged for help. I don't think that's true, Josh Boy. I think if you were watching it at the time, you would have heard the reports that showed that the Capitol Police actually asked the representative, the staff of Nancy Pelosi for more people to be on the grounds, and also the National Guard made a request to have a bigger presence, and they had next to no presence. And they had plenty of time to have a presence, but they had no presence there, hardly at all. So I don't think you're right on that. If you do some research, but you can't listen to just one side of the research. You gotta pay attention to what both sides are saying. And then, and then use some, and then it takes, I'm not saying that I'm right about all this. It doesn't really matter. But how many blacks were involved in Heaven's Gate since the beginning? I don't think that's relative, but it was very few. I think I need a username. Angie equals #1 Enigma. Okay. Hey, Sarah. Sawyer, can you or someone in the chat let me know an email address I can send something interesting for you to? Thanks. Yeah, the email address is it's in our descriptions of all this, these live streams, by the way, but it's SAW, S-A-W, CAT, C-A-T, stands for Sawyer and Kathy, 575, which has to do with how much money many of the members had in their pockets when they left, which seems to be related to Mark Twain's price to ride the comet to heaven. Anyway, at gmail.com. KWAPT says, if you go to the description and scroll to the bottom, the email is there. Oh, Kathy just said that, okay, a while ago. Then Nick said hi. If a leader of Islam can bring 1 million followers to the White House, then what's your opinion? I don't know that actually happened. They called it the Million Man March, but I don't know that actually happened. But I don't know if anybody could bring 1 million people to the Capitol. I mean, they might have been able to do it. In fact, I think that was one of the fears that they had about Martin Luther King. I remember seeing some reports of that, that they were afraid that he could bring all those people to the Capitol, and then once they were there, they would be just like sitting there, and they'd have to get rid of them somehow, and that didn't look good. So what they'd rather do is then bump them off, which that was proven to be, well, I hate to say it, but it's a government conspiracy. And, I mean, government conspiracy doesn't mean everybody knows about it. It means only a few people know about it. But that was proven by the lawyer for, was it James Earl Ray? And they had like a trial in Toronto, Canada, for him, and they exonerated him, actually. Now, I think he died soon after that. I don't remember why, But William, what was the name of his lawyer? William something. William, I forgot his name. But Sandra Day O'Connor was sitting as the judge, presiding over the case, and the King family, members of the King family, were there. So they heard the evidence that William something brought to the case, that he actually met with sharpshooters that had Martin Luther King in their sights. And they were Army sharpshooters. But they didn't have to shoot him because somebody else got to him first, because they had like 3 or 4 different hits on him. And that's a way to, make sure it gets done, and also, have confusion set in on all the different, links to those events. The leader is 90 years old a few days ago. What's going on, says Mojo. Okay, I don't know. I can't go back through it all I've been talking about. Maybe you heard some of it since I've been talking. But do you trust the FBI or other alphabet agencies? I don't trust anybody in the government. I mean, I'm not saying that they're all bad people and that, everybody's out to get, people like myself or anybody else. I don't think that's really happening. I'm not afraid of them. I haven't done anything wrong anyway. So I don't talk about, I'm not interested in overthrowing the government. I could care less. It's going to happen what's going to happen. And I don't have any weapons, and, there's nothing dangerous about me. And I don't promote suicide, because we need these vehicles in order to serve Tiendo if we want to. And we need these vehicles to learn lessons, even if we don't know about Tiendo. That's the only way we learn lessons, is by having a physical vehicle. Anyway, so Mike Floyd says the FBI tracked you guys for no reason. Well, yeah, they had their reasons. I mean, one of the reasons was that they wondered if we were responsible. I'm saying we, but the UFO cult in 1975, we would call that, were responsible for cattle mutilations. And the FBI actually came to a meeting that Tiendo were going to speak at, but they weren't on the stage. They had students on the stage initially, and they asked to speak to their leaders, and Tiendo were in a back room, and the students went back to tell them that the FBI was there, and they went out the back door because they didn't know if the FBI was going to, serve them with something or have trumped up charges or what they could do. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't hold anybody against their will ever. And I mean, they didn't, mutilate any cattle or any other animals at all. In fact, we took care of animals at times. We gave birth to kittens and puppies and gave them away to a pet store, or a shelter for them or something like that. I wasn't part of that crew, but I know that's what they did. But anyway, so did Doe have cancer? Not that I know of, and I think the coroner confirmed that he didn't have any cancer. I know people have said that he had cancer, and so he wanted to die, or he knew he was going to die soon, so he decided for everybody to die. But it didn't work that way. Doe did have complications to his when he had his vehicle castrated. But he came back from that, and I know he had a hernia operation in 1980 something, not long after T left, and he seemed to be recovered from that, by my observation. I think he was in pretty good health, actually. But the vehicles were breaking down, and his vehicle was definitely breaking down. But he wanted his vehicle to be tip-top shape for his vehicle. And that was clear. He wanted that for all our vehicles. That's why he embarked on a really health program. We had a name for the company that we started that was based on health. It was called ALERT, ALERT, which stands for Advanced Life Extension Research Team. And we went through every cleansing diet that you could imagine that, was relatively sane, that didn't involve taking mega doses of different substances and stuff. But cayenne pepper was a big part of it, cleansing the body. And so there's a lot of, there's so much evidence that makes all these documentaries look like puny little reports that are based on what one group of people want to hear. And they put a little bit, since I put myself out there in 1997 and thereafter to do all these different documentary, give them, they pay for that, for having me come in, and they don't pay me necessarily, but some of them did, a few of them did, but they want to use it because they want to appear that they're at least being objective. And to some degree, it doesn't take a lot to show some of the positive things that other people can then watch those documentaries. And when they see all that negative stuff, and then they hear somebody talking from experience about it, and they don't seem to be putting a slant on it, that's a negative slant, then that, certain people then are, they can pay attention to that. And so I think that's because the next level wants that objectivity to be there. It doesn't have to be a lot. The whole documentary can be a piece of junk in a lot of ways, but then as long as there's a few little pieces in there that are true, it might be enough that anybody that's got some next level mind in them, which can be anybody, at any time, it's even in the genetic code, if it's not been beat down to death, then they can recognize the truth when they, even if they don't recognize it like, oh, I recognize that's true. No, they might not feel that way about it, but they might recognize it enough to where they want to ask some questions of me or somebody else, or look into the Heaven's Gate material to actually see what they said, and like Kathy did, and she continues to do, and that I do as well, because when Kathy finds something of interest, she knows to me, then she shares it with me, and I go listen to the tape as well. And I do that when I walk in there, listen to some of that, because she found something that was of an interest. And sometimes I sit with Kathy and listen to the whole thing, the whole tapes. But she's got, I think we're blessed by having the opportunity for Kathy to be able to listen to these tapes, and I'm healthy enough, and I have the time and the wherewithal to actually go out and make the funds. And Kathy feels guilty about not going out and making funds, but I don't want her to feel guilty about that, because she's doing exactly what I think we need to do. Because we want to keep on bringing this information to people. And even if we can't play the tapes, we can talk about them. And people can go look for them themselves, even though I can't volunteer that now until I win this lawsuit. Because I want everybody to have availability to have the information and to disseminate it if they want to other people, so that everybody can see the truth, because the lower forces don't want to hear what T and Do were teaching all those years, because they'll seem too good. I mean, literally too good G-O-O-D. And the lower forces don't want them to seem good. They want them to seem evil. That's why they're fighting so hard through Mark and Sarah to have nothing shared with them from the tapes. And the tapes are monumental. I know people say, well, then why did Doe give them that task to divide those tapes among those? Because it was a test of them. And it didn't mean that they were going to have access to all the tapes for all time. And that was apparent right away, because Rick Odie got a hold of the first tapes, and those 214 tapes, or how many of there were, because some of them actually didn't have anything on them. There were missing tapes, actually. Even though they copyrighted 486 tapes, they weren't all tapes. So so the Copyright Office got 486, but I don't know if anybody counted them, because that was just what the log said, that there were 486 tapes. But there were a number of tapes that were missing from the log, even though there was a description in the log. So that's a whole nother subject. But so that record, and then Juan Odie, and then Doe, I believe, kind of opened Mark's eyes to sending tapes to Mark and Sarah's eyes, to send tapes to Juan Odie in Venezuela for safekeeping. But then Juan Odie, when he got those tapes, he said to himself, especially after he listened to 149, where they were talking about people having those tapes after they left, and that they could even learn by osmosis of listening to the tapes over and over again. And they're very clear about it. And when Juan Odie heard that, he thought, why we can't just keep them in a closet, so that for who? So that they'd be good for somebody in 200 years? That's ridiculous. We need this information to be out now. But the lower forces don't want that. So they, gave some convoluted thinking to Mark and Sarah that actually might have been beneficial for them initially. It might have even come from Tiendo's mind initially to make the case they made in order to get the tapes back from San Diego County, after they didn't get them the way that Doe wanted them to get them right away from the storage rooms, so that they wouldn't have even been in contention belonging to San Diego County if they had acted quickly, which, I don't fault them for, because I wasn't there to do it. I don't know if I would have acted as quickly as Rick Odie wanted to act quickly. On the day that he got his letters in the mail, on the 25th, he wrote in his manuscript that he felt guilty not doing something right away. He felt that there was something to do right away. And he was calling Mark and Sarah and asking them, talking about them, and they didn't reveal to him what the content of their letter was. Which, if they would have, then he would have known that they wanted him to go to storage right away and get the truck also from one storage room and use that truck to unload all the contents of storage that included the audio tapes, all 1,000 plus of them, into the truck. And then the job was to then divide those materials among those that wanted to disseminate their information, whoever it was, which would be an ongoing task to do, because there was no timeline on it. It was the dissemination task, the dissemination project. They talked about it many times in the letters. And they talked about it to Juan Odie, and they talked about it to Rick Odie in their letters, that they wanted that information available to the media and to the people that wanted it. And so the lower forces came in there and clamped down on it, but that wasn't necessarily a negative to Tiendo, because they made sure that Rick Odie had the tapes, just so happened the tapes that he was in. That's the tapes that he ended up having. I don't know how he decided to divide those 486 or so tapes with Al Scody at the storage room, or wherever they divided them when they went back to the second car that they got from the airport. How they decided that Rick Odie would have the ones that had T in them. Maybe they went by the dates of the log files, or maybe those were in one box, or certain boxes, and the other ones were in other boxes that Al Scody took and then gave them to Mark and Sarah. But Rick Odie took his tapes and then copied them right away and started to digitize them right away. And then he, before he left his vehicle, decided to give the masters back to Mark and Sarah to divide the way they were supposed to divide, because they promised that they would, and they didn't do it. And just like they promised to put them out on Vimeo, and they didn't do it recently. And they blame it on me and Carloti. That's the reason why they're not putting them on Vimeo. And that's just their excuse to not do it, because they recognize that Vimeo doesn't allow them to actually that there's ways that people can download them. They wanted to put them on a site that made them so that they couldn't be downloaded by anybody. But it's kind of ridiculous, because somebody could play the audios, and they could just record those voices coming across, right? And so, what difference is it? Why do you want to put somebody to that instead of even if they put watermarks on it, I don't think a watermark can interfere with somebody playing that audio on their computer and then recording what's coming across on with a microphone. It's going to be a lot worse quality to do that, probably. And it doesn't make any sense, except in the minds of individuals that have allowed themselves to be captured to some degree in this regard by the lower forces thinking, even though they think they're doing it for the right reasons. But it doesn't add up at all to what T&O's reasons are. So I didn't mean to get into all that, but so I'm gonna. Okay, Mike Floyd says, I had issues with the LAPD, so I distrust most law enforcement. I understand. I'm not a big proponent of law enforcement the way it is in this country. I'm not saying it's not worse in other places. It might be, probably is. But, there's decent people in law enforcement as well, that never use their gun, or, because guns really, having T&O felt like making weapons for the purpose of killing humans with or injuring humans with was not from the next level's mind to do. So humans got off the track when they started doing that. And, you can see how far downhill it's gone. Tell us the story when Doe rented out a warehouse and used it as a hospital and had one of the female students perform castration on one of the male students. Well, I don't want to go through that whole story. You can read it in my my WordPress blog, sawyerhg.wordpress.com. I talked about it in detail, and it's in Sawyer's Story. That's the name of the document, but just in short, it was in San Clemente, we had rented out several warehouses, and the main craft individuals were in a warehouse north of San Clemente, and Doe and his two helpers, Liv Odie and Jan Odie, were in the other warehouse. And they made a room into a sterile room, and Liv Odie had worked for an orchiectomist because she was a registered nurse, and she had a job working for an orchiectomist who removed people's testicles that had cancer. And so she knew the tools to buy, and she knew the procedure because she assisted the doctor with that operation. So she performed the operation that Sir Odie and I were asking Doe to have. For over a year, we were asking to have that operation if he ever felt like he got T's approval to do it. And so he called us up one day and told us to come to San Clemente, and we drove over there, and Sir Odie had the operation, and there was a little complication to it. So Jan Odie, Liv Odie, and I took Sir Odie to a hospital, and they fixed it really easily, and he spent the night in observation, and he was happy as a charm after that, glad that he had everything done, and they put on the entrance to the room, that was a sterile room, they put the word Mexico on it, so that if anybody questioned where we went for the operation, we could say Mexico. That's a little bit of next level humor, and like a little white lie, if you want to call it that. Like Jesus said, find agreement with your adversaries when they're in the way with you. Otherwise, you might find yourself before the court and before the judge, and even in prison, and where you'll have to pay a hefty charge for not finding, agreement. And I think that means, find a point of negotiation or a way of communicating to where you can not be, breaking any laws. Anyway, that's enough said, I think. So good night, folks.